Existential depression, the niggling feeling that you are more than this. For the intellectually restless and emotionally intense, there is a specific kind of mental ache that comes with knowing you're capable of more than your life reflects. It is not the same as regular depression, though it might look similar from the outside. It is what happens when you feel the gap between where you're at, what you're doing, and what could be. Existential depression of the gifted usually starts as a subtle, recurring, niggling awareness, a quiet hum that says, I am more than this, or some varying versions of it, from, I should not be here, I'm in the wrong city, company, circle, I do not have any equals where I am, I'm wasting my time, energy, potential here, I'm trapped because I made wrong decisions. From time to time, you feel the burning certainty of your capabilities, the deep cellular knowing that you were meant for something more expansive than your current circumstances allow. What makes existential depression so confusing is that until it explodes, it tends to whisper rather than scream. This is especially true if you've been a parentified child or a high-functioning neurodivergent adult. You might function perfectly well on the surface, meeting your obligations, appearing competent to others. But underneath, there's a constant feeling that you're hemorrhaging zest for life, losing touch with a sense of meaning and niggling discontent, despite everything looking good on the surface. Existential depression is about what remains unlived and unexpressed, and despite how you feel, the root of your sadness may not be visible. As a part of existential depression, you may have a sense of knowing, even if you may not explicitly admit it, that your insights deserve a wider audience, that your talents merit recognition from more prestigious institutions, that your contributions should yield greater rewards. This awareness does not come from nowhere. Your unconscious has accumulated information about your giftedness for years. From the moments when you grasped concepts others struggled with, when you saw patterns invisible to those around you, when you understood the unspoken dynamics in a room with clarity, when you created something that surprised even yourself. And yet, here you are, perhaps in a place where you simultaneously burn out and bore out, burdened with responsibilities but given no authority. One where you must listen to people with a fraction of your abilities, your days filled with tasks that require you to dim your brightness to fit in. For many gifted individuals, there is often a powerful internal voice that has spent years learning to diminish, doubt, and deny their own capacities. It was usually installed by caregivers, teachers, siblings, or peers who felt threatened by your sharpness and responded with criticism, dismissal, or punishment. Perhaps you were the child who corrected the teacher and learned quickly never to do so again. Perhaps you were the sibling whose achievements brought jealousy and attacks. These accumulated experiences taught you your power is dangerous. Claiming your gifts was arrogance, wanting recognition was narcissism, and believing in your own capacity was delusional. So now, whenever that niggling feeling of wanting to be more, to be elsewhere arises, the reprimand follows. The horrible inner critic says, "You're being arrogant, playing too big for your own good, wearing a hat too big for your head." The shamed self springs into action. Who do you think you are? You just want attention. If you were really that good, you would already be there. You're nothing special. Stay small. Stay safe. Stay silent. Existential depression is when your internal critical voice and your true self go into painful warfare. One part of you wants to sprout, to unfurl, to shoot toward the moon like a rocket. Another part is deeply terrified of the loneliness, the annihilation, the social judgment and potential exile, the responsibility and visibility that come with standing at your full height. These two parts cannot be reconciled through suppression, though you have likely tried for years. You cannot shame yourself out of your ambition, nor can you bypass the fear of social exile and annihilation when you grow out of where you are. The result is a psychic fracture that morphs into a storm and is experienced as existential depression proper. Regret for paths not taken, envy of childhood peers, imposter syndrome that says you're a fraud, perfectionism that prevents you from creating, and a pervasive sense of never being quite right, screaming, "Not here, not now, not this." And make no mistake, the existential nature of it does not make it any less real or any less dangerous. When the psyche tears itself apart like this, it can lead you to very dark places. If you find yourself spiraling into hopelessness, paralysis, or thoughts of self-harm, you need and deserve immediate support. Medication, therapy, and psychiatric intervention may have their places. They're sometimes the very scaffolding that keeps you alive long enough to do the deeper work of becoming. Existential depression and banning envy. Envy, the social taboo, is often a painful, silenced part of existential depression for the gifted. Perhaps triggered when you scroll through social media and see someone announcing their salary, their status, their new diploma, their tenure, their sparkling social media presence, their happy family, their sold-out show. The envy that exists in existential depression often morphs and metastasizes. Sometimes it turns into rage at the world, at gatekeepers, at systems that reward mediocrity and punish depth, at the successful person themselves, even when some part of you loves them dearly and admires them. Sometimes it turns inward, becoming the acid of self-hatred, regret, and self-doubt, as if everything you have done so far was wrong. The gifted adult has also learned to silence this very quickly, to push it down, to feel ashamed for having such shallow concerns. After all, should you not be above caring about recognition, prestige, and external validation? Should you not be happy for your friend? Are you a horrible person? One tricky part of existential depression is how it clouds your vision and turns every success story into a mirror reflecting your own stuckness. Every announcement of achievement feels like an indictment of your choices, your timing, your failures to capitalize on your own potential. In existential depression, it is as though everything triggers you to mourn the parallel life you could have lived, the version of yourself that could have made different choices, taken bigger risks, and so on. Envy and yearning in an existential depression are often domain-specific. If you have a high intellectual capacity that devours complex ideas, you may find yourself plagued by fantasies of being at prestigious institutions, having conversations where the depth and rigor stimulate you. If you have breakthrough insights and tend to see solutions and innovations that others do not yet perceive, constantly seeing the frontier of what is possible, you may feel you deserve to be in the buzz of top tech agencies, not a small company where your vision is met with blank stares or cautious resistance. If you have extraordinary artistic vision in writing or the arts, you may ache to be in a vibrant city, a cultural hub where your work could find its audience, where galleries, publishers, and producers are. If you have a gift for scientific research and discovery, you may yearn to be at institutions where the resources, equipment, and collaborative networks exist to pursue questions at the scale they deserve. The specificity of your longing can feel embarrassingly materialistic. You may judge your internal, almost subconscious whisper that says, "It could have been me," You may condemn yourself for the part of you that does care about being visible and wants to be heard. But perhaps you are unjustly faulting yourself because you have not seen the deeper layer. You yearn for more, not because you're shallow. What is triggered underneath the envy is a complex mix of longing, resentment, and despair. Your envy is a messenger, and what underlies it is a legitimate human need for congruence, to have your internal experience and perception to be reflected in outer reality, to exist in the world and be seen as who you feel you are on the inside. The desire for your external reality to match your internal reality is not the same as grandiosity. It is not an illness. It is just so human. When you sense yourself to be of a certain magnitude internally, but have to shrink yourself to only a fraction of that size, the pain from the dissonance is real. Such is the call from your human need for internal coherence, for authentic self-expression and recognition. For the gifted ones, the pain of incongruence might have begun early. The seed of humiliation trauma was planted when you were an old soul stuck in a young child's body and situation. You had all the insights, perceptions, and cognitive abilities that surpassed those of the adults around you, yet you were systematically dismissed, patronized, or simply not seen. It is likely that, and this happens for a lot of gifted people, your capacity is not the kind easily recognized by conventional systems. Our current educational and economic structures reward only a narrow band of intelligence and productivity, leaving neurodiverse people with different cognitive styles, creative orientations, or value systems feeling perpetually misaligned and unseen. Maybe your particular gifts, penetrating psychological insight, or visionary imagination just do not translate cleanly into credentials or monetary reward in our neoliberal world. But still, your sense of your gifts is not delusion. The grief you feel at their lack of external validation, development, or expression is not just you being superficial. Your feeling comes from years of accumulated data, explicit and implicit, verbal and non-verbal, hinting at you, niggling at you, shouting at you that you do have above average capacity. Your existential depression, big or small, loud or whispering, is the legitimate pain of unrealized potential, of gifts that have found no proper home in the world. The psychoanalyst Heinz Kohut introduced the concept of mirroring to describe this. We do have a human need to have our inner reality reflected back to us accurately by our environment. The child needs caregivers who mirror their emotional states, their emerging self, their particular way of being in the world. When this mirroring is adequate, the child develops a coherent, healthy sense of self. When mirroring is inadequate, distorted, or absent, the child's development is compromised. For the gifted person, adequate mirroring is rare. Your internal experience, your intensity, the complexity, the particular quality of your perceptions and capacities are often not mirrored by your environment. Parents may not understand you. Teachers may not recognize your qualities. Peers may not see you for who you are. The mismatch between who you know yourself to be and what the world reflects back creates a profound disorientation, a constant, haunting uncertainty about the validity of your own experience. When you dream about being at a prestigious institution or in a particular professional context, what you're really imagining is finally being in an environment that sees you accurately. The fantasy is that in a competitive academic setting, your intellectual intensity would not be weird. No one would take your intellectual challenge personally, and it would be welcomed into a rigorous debate. At a top tech company, your innovative thinking would not be threatening. It would be valued. At a leading research institution, your ambitious questions would not be dismissed as unrealistic. They would be encouraged and supported. These imaginative scenarios may or may not be true, but what they symbolize is what makes them alluring. A room full of gifted adults like you represents the possibility of congruence, of your inner reality finally matching your outer reality, of being seen at your actual size rather than being perpetually told, implicitly or explicitly, that you are too much or not enough. Kohut also wrote about the need for what he called twinship, the experience of being with others who are fundamentally like you, who share your essential nature. For gifted individuals who grew up feeling profoundly alone, different, unable to share their real thoughts and perceptions because they had no one who could understand them, the longing for twinship is acute. When you imagine yourself in the right professional or intellectual community, you're imagining finding your tribe. People who think as you think, who care about what you care about, who understand without lengthy explanation, who make you feel less alone. This longing is especially powerful if twinship was absent from your family of origin, if you grew up as the odd one out, the one nobody quite understood, the one who learned early to translate yourself for people who spoke a different language. The envy or bitterness you feel when you see someone else occupying the space you feel you should occupy is often less about external rewards themselves and more about the mirroring and twinship those positions represent. You imagine that they get to be seen accurately. They get to be with their people. They get to experience the relief of congruence. And you are still here in misalignment, invisible in your actual size, aching with the loneliness of being unseen. In other words, your yearning for the right context is your psyche's wisdom pointing toward what you need to thrive. The shame you feel about this yearning is yet another layer of misattunement, another way you have learned to invalidate your legitimate needs because the world around you could not or would not meet them. Existential depression and positive disintegration. Perhaps Kazimierz Dąbrowski's theory of positive disintegration is one of the most relevant frameworks for understanding existential depression in gifted adults. Rather than viewing this suffering as pathology to be eliminated, Dąbrowski proposed that certain forms of psychological distress are actually signs of growth, markers of a consciousness attempting to move toward a higher level of functioning. Dąbrowski observed that people with strong developmental potential often experience what he called positive maladjustment, a productive discomfort with conventional norms, easy answers, and surface-level existence. The gifted cannot simply accept things as they are. They are constitutionally driven to question, to seek deeper meaning, to hold themselves and the world to higher standards. This creates friction, discomfort, and often significant psychological distress. Your existential depression is really the productive falling apart of a self-structure that no longer fits. It may look like depression, anxiety, nihilism, panic. You might experience intense internal conflict as competing values and parts of yourself battle for dominance. You might feel overwhelmed by ambiguity, no longer certain of who you are or what you believe. You might be plagued by guilt, shame, and dissatisfaction with oneself, as Dąbrowski termed it. But even as we honor the developmental dimension of this pain, we must not romanticize the suffering. The weight of existential depression can become unbearable. It can strip away your will to continue. It can make every morning feel like drowning. If you are in that place, please know. Seeking psychiatric help, trying medication, working with a therapist are not admissions of defeat. They are acts of survival, of giving yourself the biochemical and emotional support you need while your psyche does its brutal work of reorganization. But Dombrowski insisted this disintegration, while painful, could be positive. The breaking down of the old is making way for the new, for a more autonomous, more authentically chosen way of being. The envy you feel, however much shame you have attached to it until now, might actually be productive and developmental. It is your psyche pointing toward an unlived life, toward capacities that demand expression, toward a version of yourself that you have not yet managed to bring into being. Rather than shutting it down with self-recrimination, what if you could listen to it? The question is not, is this resentment justified, but what is this resentment asking of me? What does it want me to know? What does it want me to do? Your existential depression, then, might be what Dombrowski termed positive disintegration. It may not be a disorder to be medicated away, though psychiatry and medication certainly have their place for many people, but a developmental call asking you to shed a skin that no longer fits and to grow into a larger version of yourself, even though you do not yet know what that version looks like or how to get there. Jung and the second half of life. Carl Jung's framework for the second half of life offers another lens through which to understand existential depression. Jung observed that the first half of life is typically about ego building, establishing oneself in the world, and achieving conventional markers of success. But at midlife, which can arrive at various chronological ages, many people experience a crisis precipitated by the realization that the life they have built does not match who they actually are. For gifted people, the crisis often comes earlier and more intensely because the mismatch between internal and external reality has been present from the beginning. But whenever it arrives, Jung saw it not as pathology, but as the psyche's call toward individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are instead of who you were conditioned to be. In the second half of life, Jung argued the task is no longer about achieving external success, but about achieving internal wholeness. Your existential depression might be the signal that you have reached the threshold of the second half, where the old motivations and validations no longer satisfy. The achievements that once seemed meaningful now feel hollow. The paths that once seemed clear now feel constricting. Your psyche is demanding something different now, something deeper. Your existential depression might be the psyche's way of forcing the reversal, of making continued smallness so unbearable that you have no choice but to risk growing. The consciousness you're developing, awareness of the gap between your capacity and your circumstances, understanding of how you've been shaped by early experiences, recognition of your legitimate needs and suppressed yearnings. All of it is painful, but it is also the prerequisite for change. You cannot shift what you cannot see. The move toward individuation does not mean abandoning your external goals. It means holding them differently, pursuing them from a place of self-knowledge instead of compensation for inner emptiness. It means recognizing that no external achievement will resolve your existential unease unless you also do the internal work of integration, of gathering all the rejected and suppressed parts of yourself back into wholeness, learning to hold the both and. If there is a path through this, it likely does not involve resolving the tension, but learning to hold it differently. The path forward may not be that you must choose between the part of you that wants to soar and the part that fears to fly. And there is certainly no need to violently destroy the past, regret your decisions, or resent your life. in the spirit of amor fati, being a lover of the fate of your unique neuro-wiring, let's affirm and embrace everything that has brought you to this exact moment, including the pain, the missed opportunities, and the years of oppression. They've all been preparing you for something, and from a wider cosmic perspective, they have been exactly what they had to be. A gentle, more water-like approach may be the wiser path when dealing with something as complex as an existential depression. Honor both your past and potential future, the stuck part and the part itching to soar, and allow these parts to inform and temper each other without cancelling each other out. Yes, you have extraordinary capacities that deserve expression and recognition, but you also do not want to outgrow everything and everyone you know overnight. And yes, the world can be hostile to those who shine too brightly, but that may not be a sufficient reason for you to hide forever. Both realities coexist, and the art of adulting is to find a livable space within an imperfect reality. Living with existential depression means learning to tolerate the unbearable tension between who you are and who you might become, between the life you have and the life that haunts you. It means refusing to collapse into either pole, neither denying your extraordinary capacity nor letting it become a weapon you use against yourself. The pain does not go away, but your relationship to it can shift. You can stop treating it as evidence of your failure and begin to see it as the growing pains of a consciousness that refuses to stay small. Moving forward, I hope all of this discussion serves to nudge you to understand your existential depression differently. The gnawing sense that you're in the wrong place, that you've failed to live up to your potential, that you're watching from the sidelines as others claim what should be yours, may be evidence that you are becoming ready for a breakthrough. You were not ready before. In the first half of your life, you were still learning the language of the world that was never built for minds like yours. Still trying to translate your inner wilderness into something palatable, something that could fit through conventional doorways. But something has shifted. You are stronger now, more equipped, more resilient, and you are more ready for the next half of your life. So you are beginning to see the gap. The existential anxiety, the envy, the self-doubt, the internal conflict, all of it might be the messy, uncomfortable, necessary work of a consciousness attempting to evolve beyond the limitations that have confined it. Your psyche is trying to break through to something higher, something more authentic, something that finally allows the internal vastness to find external expression.